I'm up against because the competition will be formidable.
It's true.
So Randy is a frequent Moth story slammer, has been in the Moth Grand Slam 4 times. Oh, I'm sorry, I should introduce one more thing. So during this, when each side of the couple is speaking, the other side will sit on a stool and not be allowed to say a word. They will get their turn.
You can make all the facial expressions and hand gestures you want to, and I'm probably going to turn every shade of red because I get mad every time we talk about an argument, but no words.
Yeah, no, you must silently sit and listen, which is what most of us do not do during a disagreement. And so, Randy is a frequent Moth story slammer, has been in the Moth Grand Slam 4 times and won in 2013. She performed at the Moth Ball in New York City and has been featured on the Moth podcast and website. She also produced 2 recent Louisville storytelling shows, Expressing Motherhood and this one. She's also been a twice featured storyteller on Kentucky Homefront, and her work's been in Reader's Digest and Caveller, Teaching Tolerance, and the Parents for Social Justice blog. She teaches middle school language arts at Farnsley Middle School and JCPS. Randi Skaggs.
Yeah. And since we don't know who's going to go first because we're flipping a coin, I'll go ahead and introduce David. This guy here, Dave, is also the winner of multiple story slams. We've each beaten each other at least once, and our marriage survived somehow.
No, it was once. I beat Randy once.
And I think I beat you once. That's what I mean.
No, you beat me a few times.
Oh, okay.
It's a lot like Raging Bull when he beats Sugar Ray like once. And then he's really like, he never does it again. Anyway, so.
I like that you brought out, is that a boxing? I don't even know. I'm like,
yeah, it's a boxing and a movie
reference.
thing,
Okay.
so don't worry about it.
Yeah, whatever. He's an award-winning journalist, the past deputy editor at Forbes.com. He was a reporter at Forbes magazine. He's written for NPR's On the Media, Public Radio's Marketplace, WFPL, Playboy, CNBC.com, and many other publications. He was also recently a featured reading, and by recently I mean last night in this very space, at the Inky Reading Fest. Oh, he says like, okay, never mind. I read your mind before I read this. And he also co-produces this show. And yeah, so, okay, we're going to flip a coin to see who goes first. And I'm going to say I want heads while you're doing this, and I'll set the stool up.
Yeah, and each storyteller gets about 5 minutes to do their thing. So, I'll let Randy read it, so there's no tomfoolery or trickery.
I mean,
can I have my quarterback?
yes, you can. All right. I don't know if going first. I don't know if going first is better. I don't know. It helps with my opening line. Otherwise, I don't know if this is better. Okay. So Dave will tell you that this fight was about cell phones. This fight was not about cell phones. Back in 2001, when we started dating, a lot of people, like Dave, did not want to get a cell phone. They didn't like the idea of being accessible 24 hours a day, which is totally understandable. So you would call their landline, you would leave a message, they would call you back in some reasonable amount of time. The issue was that in addition to his landline, Dave had a dial-up internet service. So he would unplug his phone to plug in his computer. 30 minutes of like obnoxious noise making later, he would get online and he would go to AOL Instant Messenger or what have you. And then many, many times he would forget to plug his phone back in. So Dave, to this day, does not realize that this was an issue. And here is why. We were new in our relationship. I did not want to nitpick every little thing. That came later. And I wanted to be that cool girlfriend, like, whatever. No, like, I don't have any expectations of you because, having expectations in a relationship, if you're a woman, is a really bad thing. I mean, just let's not do that, women. Whatever. So, maybe I would get the busy signal, and I'd call 2 hours later. Maybe I'd reach him. Oftentimes, I would call back 5 hours later and still not be able to reach him. Maybe 12 hours. No dice. 24 happened a few times, and even into 48 hours. So by the time I would reach him, though, I would act like it was the first time I called. Like he just happened to plug his internet in, or his phone back in, and like, oh, magically I call, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, hey, how's it going? Just thinking about you. He didn't know that there was this rage building inside of me because, it wasn't so much about the communication. It was like, this was not fair. I had my little Nokia. He could reach me whenever he wanted to. But on my end, I had to hope that the planets were aligned and the west wind was blowing just properly and make a little small animal sacrifice in order to just reach this guy. And it was not fair. Which brings us to a very cold spring day in March in New York City. I was exiting my West Village apartment, the door shut behind me, and I realized I'd locked myself out. Thankfully, I had my cell phone on me, so I called my roommate who also had a cell phone. Her name was Andrea, but she didn't answer, so I left a message, and I went about my business, just trying to take my mind off things, shopping and what have you. 2 hours later, Andrea had not called me back. So I called her again, I left another message, and I was not feeling good about this because two things. Andrea had a very serious boyfriend. She was sleeping over at his house a lot, so she wasn't in our apartment a lot. And she hated my guts, hated me. And so I could just see her thinking, oh, yeah, this is a way to get back at Randy, So I took a deep breath, and I called Dave's number. And it may not make sense to you that I was nervous about calling him, about maybe crashing at his place. Not to offend you guys, we had already slept over at each other's places a few times. I was in my late 20s. He was almost 30. It's okay. But in addition to having issues with his telephone communication, he also was a bit of a commitment phobe. So he kind of, without this being a spoken rule, it was really clear that he only wanted us to see each other once a week. It never happened. We did not have more than a once-a-week date. And he also did, it had to be planned in advance. I couldn't call him up and be like, hey, I'm in your neighborhood. Let's go have lunch. He had a very... He had a very clear set of boundaries, right? And if he was in his space, that's why he didn't have a cell phone, he didn't want to be interrupted. So me calling him and saying, hey, I might need to crash at your place tonight, I didn't know how that was going to go. But I needn't worry, because I got the busy signal. Okay, great. So I was like, oh, crap. And I'm starting to get really nervous. I'm like, I got to take my mind off this. So I went to the movies, saw a movie, came out, called Andrea, left a message, called Dave, got the busy signal. So I go to the library. And when I get out of the library, I call Andrea, leave a message, call Dave, get the busy signal. It's dinner time. I go get a slice of pizza. I call Andrea, leave a message. I call Dave, get a busy signal. It is nighttime. It is raining. And I'm freaking out. I'm having these visions of myself sleeping in Port Authority, trying not to get murdered. And so I go to Virgin Megastore on 14th Street because that's where I always went when I had time to kill because they had CDs, if y'all remember what those were. And you could just put on headphones and listen to all the CDs you wanted to. And periodically I'm calling Andrea, leaving a message, calling Dave, getting a busy signal. And I find myself gravitating more and more to the angry women artists singing about their damn boyfriends who are never there for them. And I'm working myself into a lather at this point. And I'm like, this is not okay. We are at this age, we're serious and we're at this age and I shouldn't be worried about calling him when I have no place to go and he should plug his damn phone back in and this is just so stupid. And so I'm like, I'm going there. I'm going to his apartment. And I've never done anything like this before. I'm going to burst his damn little bubble. And so I get on the subway and I get off at 45th Street and I'm standing in front of his building and I can see his apartment. He's at this 5th floor apartment. It faces the street and the light is on. And I'm I'm imagining him comfortable on his couch reading a book because he didn't have a TV. He was too good for that too. And I'm so pissed off. And it's this deranged John Hughes film. I start screaming his name on the street. I'm like, Dave, Serchuk! And I want him to come to the window and see me in the rain, freezing, and be like, I am a terrible boyfriend. But that doesn't happen. There's not a shadow. And so I see this guy coming out, and I'm like, oh, I'm rush. And I do that thing where I'm like, hey, yeah, I live here, totally. And I slip in the apartment building, and I take the elevator up, and I get to his door, and I bang on the door. And he goes, who is it? And I go, it's me. And he opens the door, and this will be our first fight, and I am so ready for it. And he looks at me, and he goes, hey, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm just surprised. This is not the reaction I expected from him. And I'm like, no. And I tell him the story, and he surprises me because he draws me a hot bath, and he gets me a cup of hot tea, and of course he lets me sleep there. But listen, okay? Don't get all like mushy about that, because that's what he was supposed to do, right? And had he like not had this impenetrable bubble around himself and decided that he could just like seclude himself from the world, including his girlfriend, I never would have spent a whole day terrified of where I was going to sleep. So in conclusion, let me just say, vote for me, because I will be the better, I don't know, like I'm trying to be like a class president here. But anyway, vote for me. I'm the winner. Thank you. Bye.
Now I feel like I just won. Okay, so thank you, Randy. So yes, it was March 2002. We'd been dating for a few months. We started dating at the end of 2001, and it was going really well. Randy was charming and charismatic, and we had a lot of fun together. We had a lot of sleepovers together. And one thing I would say, though, is that I was of a mindset in that point, and I think it was and is a valid mindset. I believed in freedom. Not freedom from another human being necessarily, but freedom from this motherfucking thing that tethers me to misery 24 hours a day, and I saw it coming. And everybody in this room with a cell phone, everybody here has to admit that our lives have all gotten more convenient, more miserable, more neurotic, because the idea that we could have any personal space or personal time or ability to get back to somebody and have it take longer than 5 to 10 minutes has been eroded. So I said, I have a phone. It's perfectly easy to reach me. I'm going to resist the need to be accessible all the time, because most of it is going to be bullshit. And I was right about that. Now, Randy, in her defense, certainly got the details right about me having a plug-in to my phone, because I wasn't a wealthy man. And I could not afford a modem. I had a People PC that used a landline, because that's all I could afford on their cheapest plan, while I was trying to make it as a journalist while working a job, working nights, so that I could actually produce the material that would get me noticed and hired by anybody to get me out of writing about brokerages, which is what I was doing at nighttime. And so, yeah, I burned a lot of midnight oil. But I also would get everybody back. There was never a time of 48 hours. That is insanity. That is lunacy, I tell you. So, was there a day Randy got locked out of her apartment? Of course there was. Andrea was not a good roommate. This has been established. I would agree with that 100%. In fact, the only reason Randy and I dated at all was that Randy could exact revenge on Andrea, who would screw her boyfriend and leave the door open. And then Randy was like, well, I need a boyfriend to screw. And guess who that boyfriend was? But we closed the door. Maybe we shouldn't have closed the door. I don't know. Maybe that's the wrong move. But we did. We closed the door. And we survived, that time. And our relationship was flourishing. But was I a little cautious? Is this unreasonable to be a little cautious? People in the audience, I was an older person. I was 30. I'd had no success in relationships. The relationships I'd had burned and crashed to the ground. And I thought, a strong relationship, one built on love and trust, is one where the other person respects the fact that the other person may have a slower pace in the relationship than they might, where there might be some initial boundaries so that we could establish mutual trust and respect. And that is the foundation of a true relationship. We can all agree on that, right? We can all agree on that. So, you almost clapped. Thank you, sir. He almost touched his head. And then he stopped and thought better of it. So he's like, yeah, I'm with you, bro. Well, but maybe not that much. I hope nobody's watching. So I've got him on my side. But the day in question, yes. Was I working? Of course I was. Back then, I worked all the time. If I wasn't busy doing job stuff, I was freelancing, I was gathering information, and my slow-ass dial-up, yeah, it was a frustrating thing, it was a terrible thing, and if I could have gotten a modem, if I could have afforded it, I would have. Modems were a luxury that came later. And that day, I was wholly ignorant of what was happening to Randi. She describes it as a comedy of errors culminating in my negligence. But I will say that one part of her story is disastrously factually inaccurate. So she was at the street, shouting up to my window like I was, I don't know, the Count of Monte Cristo or something like that, and that she could not gain my attention. Randi, this is false. My apartment faced the back of the building. And the courtyard. Yes, it did. Yes, it did. I lived there. Yes, it did. So that shit's just false. So remember that, jury. This little detail she's been stewing about since 2002 was wholly a myth created after the fact. And yes, then there was a knock on my door. And I was a little surprised, because it wasn't a doorman building, but this is New York City, it was locked. And so when somebody knocks on the door, here's what I heard. Randi described her voice as filled with almost like a Medea-like fury. But that is not how it sounded. This is how it sounded. I will never forget it. Knock, knock. Who's there? It's me. Randi? And I open the door, and she is soaking wet. My girlfriend is soaking wet. I did not know any of the circumstances that had transpired that day, which were almost entirely Andrea's fault, by the way. And the first thing I do is I let her in. I'm so happy to see her. I give her a big hug, draw her a bath, get her some tea, and I make her as comfortable as I possibly can, and I'm so happy to see her. Ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly what happened. Randi knows. And with that, we now leave it to you.
All right, so I don't know if we actually discussed how we decide who wins. I guess applause, right?
I guess applause, and it should be. So I will say, ladies and gentlemen, if you think Randi Skaggs won this argument, please clap for her.
Thank you. There may be a gender divide right now. And if you believe that David Serchuk won, please give him some applause.
I won! I have never won an argument in our relationship.
Listen, you should really relish this moment.
I'm going to take it with me. I'm going to put it in my...
Would sing that like one moment in time
Oh, she was
song.
so confident she was going to kick my ass all day. So confident.
I'm going to let him have this. It's really nice to see him. It's good. It's good to see him feel good about it.